She looks remarkably like a woman I know that works for the Mental Health Trust, which is odd. Maybe they like to employ women in their late 40s, early 50s with shoulder-length grey hair.
You think they're homogenous?
I do. Or homunculus.
No, homunculus is a little tiny little human being.
Yeah, they're all very tiny, like Morph.
How tall is she?
She's about, I'd say, 17 inches.
Okay.
Give or take. See the little red bar going, that's why I switched into podcast mode.
Is this podcast mode?
Yeah, I wasn't very talkative before, but now I'm chatty.
You really do switch it on.
Yeah, I do.
Such a charmer.
It's a performance.
I need to G myself up. So, we're at James's dining table. I don't think it is a dining table at the moment. I think it's more of a crafts table.
Well, no, we had dinner on it this evening.
And then you took it over quickly to...
I moved stuff on and I moved stuff off again.
I'm seeing parts. I'm getting a vibe. It's kind of a lived-in science fiction universe vibe.
That's right.
I'm guessing Battlestar Galactica.
That's correct.
It's the modern era Battlestar Galactica.
Modern era. I'm looking round at it now.
I need to. There's the actual.
Would you like to see it? I'll bring it over. Here's the main body of the craft.
That's lovely.
Oh, the decals were a real pain in the arse. I've spent an hour getting them in. I'm still not happy with them.
So what you get is you get plain plastic.
Yes.
And it's okay. It's in the shapes. I can tell from looking at it.
There's 60 pieces to this model.
And also, but you have to carve out the little bits of detail. These little lines.
Yeah, you have to carve it all out yourself. Just plain plastic.
Right. Okay.
You have to carve out all of the detail.
Reminds me of an old Mad cartoon.
Really?
Yes, where you get a block of wood and some instructions, and you have to whittle down to. Of course, the Mad cartoon was basically just describing whittling. Now that I think about it,
he was. So, talking of Mad, I started watching It's a Mad World. Today I fell asleep half an hour in.
I get the feeling it's probably not as good.
I loved
as Memory. But you fell asleep.
Yeah, but then I haven't slept properly now in about four weeks. What do you reckon, Nicola? Yeah, 4 or 5 weeks since I last slept properly. So I'm started sleeping at really odd times. I seem to be catching up a couple of hours during the day now, which isn't good.
I think I'm probably going on about 15 years.
I should check my...
Getting about 3 or 4 hours a night.
I should check my insomnia privilege, shouldn't I?
Well, the thing is, I'm not an insomniac. I think we probably talked about it before. It's kind of willful, because given the chance, I can sleep any time. Like when we go on a long journey, I'll happily sleep in the car, and given the opportunity, I will have naps during the day and stuff like that. But my problem is, I don't enjoy... I think it's largely what I'm getting up for. I think for the longest time I've been a little bit down about getting up for work specifically, having literally just, oh great, so literally I'm going to be getting up to get dressed and showered. I enjoy showers, don't enjoy getting dressed. I'm going to have to do that. Get out of the bed, get dressed. Neither of those things are things I enjoy.
Right.
And my reward for doing these two things I don't like is that I have to work.
All right.
And depending on where I'm at with my particular job and my workplace at that particular point, sometimes I'll dread that less or more.
Okay.
But it generally means that I'm trying to cram so much in. My brain's so buzzy in the evenings. But it's not like... It's one of those things, if I went to bed... I could probably sleep. It's just I choose not to go to bed. See, I don't think it's... I
don't want to do anything, and I could happily sleep for 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's kind of why I'm making a model at the moment. It forces me to focus on something.
Yeah? Is it working, though? Do you find it...
No, I've spent about 6 or 7 hours on it today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, really. I enjoy it. It takes quite a long time. You're having to paint the components before they go on and wait for them to dry, put second coat on, gluing, waiting for that to go off, so it's all... and the decals took me an hour, the decals, man. Oh dear, they were difficult. And they're going to be hidden behind the landing pods.
Oh, right, landing
pods. Well, that's the engine in the inside there. And then it's the landing pods that sit outside the main craft, isn't it?
Well, it's really the same design as the original, isn't it? I don't think I'd ever really registered how similar it was.
No, they're pretty much exactly the same.
Because I really like... They are quite similar, but the 1970s version is a really classic and very specific design, isn't it? So it's weird that this one's so similar, but actually still looks kind of unique. The cat's doing something that's winding up.
I'm sorry, I'm getting really confused. It looked like the cat was about to climb the bookcase, which would have been a first. I've never seen him get up there, but they do like to be up high, don't they?
Yes.
He doesn't have to look big when he stretches himself out like that.
The reason they like to get up high is because at the point when the cat gets to peak height, the bacteria, the virus, and the spores that are living inside it are activated. The cat explodes and spreads its spores.
That's what he's trying to do. Do you think he was trying to activate himself earlier when I was trying to watch It's a Mad, 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 Mad World? Occasionally he'd jump up on me and start using me as some sort of kneading cushion.
Probably, yeah.
It's quite painful. He's definitely trying to get in somewhere, isn't he? He's in our living room now looking at I think he's trying to get inside the television cabinet.
There's some very popular, in terms of how many places I've heard people talking about it, research. I don't think we've talked about it before, about... It's kind of a school of scientific research on parasitic organisms that change the behaviour of their host. And one of the main ones is there's this general impression, and it's kind of a stereotype about the cat lady. And
yes.
And people tend to link... usually women, but people who have lots of cats with mental illness.
Yes.
They think that it's a certain sort of a person who's got a certain sort of mental health issue that makes them more prone to, and like hoarding and stuff. But actually, they're starting to think that it might be the other way around.
I heard this the other day on the popular podcast Tell 'em Steve Dave. The same thing, because one of the hosts there has several cats. And also has depressive illness. It's
the idea, and I love it, that there's actually a parasite that lives... It's not even cats, it's a parasite that lives inside cats or cat feces or something, that because it's spread by cat feces, it wants you to have more... It wants there to be more cats around, so it infects humans with the desire to have more cats around. Something like that, anyway.
I don't want any more cats.
No, I don't think every cat's got it. I don't think it lives in every cat.
Okay.
It's...
just a select few.
Interestingly, although this is quite a recent thing that people are talking about, one of the first Swamp Thing comics I read, and I'm not actually... I don't think it was an Alan Moore issue. It might have been one that's post-Alan Moore.
Okay.
It was an annual that had Batman in it, and it was all about this infection that was going through Gotham, that were these spores that got into people that made them climb to the highest point or get to the highest point, at which point exactly the scenario I described about your cat. And obviously Swamp Thing gets involved because it's kind of a plant organism thing, which was a really long time ago. And at the time I thought that's really imaginative, but I suspect that they just had heard early versions of this research that's doing around at the moment.
Almost certainly.
It's too much of a coincidence,
Possibly.
Otherwise, isn't it?
Either that, or the writer of that story manufactured the spores that the cats now carry.
Yeah, maybe.
He may have, because it's possible, isn't it? You know, if he was young and you've changed careers, study, become like a biologist or something, and then you go mad. So after you become a professor, and then you create. Oh, I had a good idea. in that story I wrote. I'll do that, but with cats, because they're less likely to tell.
In your universe, are all professors mad? Do you have to become mad to become a professor?
No. I think becoming a professor makes you mad.
Your neighbours are very noisy today.
It's a power thing. Well, he likes to come in and go out again.
Damn him. Our neighbours are always doing that as well.
He's nice. I like him.
He sounds nice.
He's building a motorbike.
I think I saw him doing it.
Yeah.
I wish I could build a motorbike.
We got really upset by him building the motorbike outside her.
I didn't.
You did. You tried to. I saw you had a gun, and you were going to use it, and it
and
was
a
only,
knife and a candlestick.
Yeah. And I had to talk you down.
That's true.
For a loudhailer.
You do quite often have to talk me down.
That's why I always have a loudhailer with me, just in case.
Speaking of versions of me that aren't how I see myself, but are apparently how other people see me.
Yeah.
I have apparently become a Maxi Barnard shorthand for old people who are grumpy at young people.
So I hear.
It's a new podcast. I know you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet because the first episode is really long.
Yeah, but I've got so little time on my hands.
Yeah, it's called the show. The precursor to it was Tim and Max explain everything about popular culture or something like that.
How did they get on with that? Did they explain everything, or did they? Stop
they
short?
did it really quickly in about 5 or 6 episodes, I think.
Succinct.
Which apparently was three years ago or something ridiculous like that. No. That's what it said. That's what they said. And so they started a new one.
Not these young people are like that, isn't it? It's probably a year and a half ago. Oh, it feels like 3 years.
The title is really long, and it's something like Tim and Max examine themselves through the medium of discussions about pop culture. That's not the name of it, but it's something like that.
Isn't it called Two Young Men?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's called. I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
I've got a sneaking suspicion, as well as being the person they talk to. Right, so here's the thing. This might be based on jokes I have made, but isn't really reflective of how I really feel. They have a moment where they're talking about getting nostalgic, and then
for what? 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Oh, do you remember 10 minutes ago? Oh.
And then they said, say, of course, a few of the older people listening. Probably, when they hear guys our age saying that, then like you just did, basically, they're like, "What have you got to be nostalgic about?" Yeah. And then at some point shortly after, Max drops my name into the mix. But I don't think I.
Now, did he call you by your full name? And he did. How did he get on with the surname?
I think he got through all of it, but Tim kind of talked over that bit, so I.
To be fair, I mean that would have been a good. It
was about 5 to 20. I think that's why the episode's so long.
That would have been half the episode on its own.
It's. He also Max also does a lovely thing where he says, "But these are the things that we grew up with, and those guys had Thundercats and stuff like that." And I listened to that and I thought, "Oh, that's nice," because I was already too old for formative experiences by the time Thundercats came out. When it
started, I was just about still young enough to watch it, but like you, I have much fonder memories of Battle of the Planets.
I watched it.
Do you think that's what, I don't know if we've spoken about this before, do you think that's what made, because obviously the audience that grew up with Battle of the Planets were a more mature audience, obviously, by the time the early 90s came around, or sort of late 80s, early 90s, when manga first started, or anime as it is now, but we all called it manga at the time. Do you think that made us more receptive? Because obviously it has that anime manga look. Do you think that made a more receptive audience for it in the sort of late 80s, early 90s?
Well, I think that was probably the first thing that made it over here.
Yeah.
But nearly everything, because there's... something I always found strange is there seems to be a huge cultural crossover between Japan and France. I definitely think that that was one of the first proper Japanese imports, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably.
And
the only one I remember that and Tarzan, but that wasn't a Japanese import.
There's probably people in roughly our age group who started discovering and bringing over films like Akira and Ghost in the Shell.
It's all very Gen X stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe a little bit older than us. So people who are old enough... Because the thing is, I don't think we realised that Battle of the Planets was Japanese It was just a different aesthetic.
No, I knew even as a kid it was foreign. So there was stuff where, obviously lip sync in animation isn't always perfect, but there were times where it was so off that it was obvious that, they were laughing at stuff that clearly wasn't in the slightest bit funny.
I didn't even register that. I think that's just the world I occupy. I quite often assume that I just didn't get what was funny about the thing. So it's. I
used to enjoy running around the schoolyard with my parka done up round the top. Just didn't have my arms in it and had it done up the top button, running around playing Battle of the Planets, because obviously parkas made for very good cloaks.
Yeah, I can see that.
Funny, even then I was tiny.
Yeah. You mean you were very small?
No,
like you are now.
I was the fat character, but I was tall and thin as a child.
Oh, tiny in Battle of the Planets.
That's right. Yeah, the corpulent character.
I always liked Keop.
Yes,
he was the little one,
the funny one. Yeah,
isn't that funny? The little funny one who was a bit weird,
and the R2-D2 knockoff
with a giant beard.
Yeah,
I maybe didn't realise it was an anime thing, but I definitely, when Thundercats came around, and Dungeons and Dragons, which I think was a bit earlier and was probably more.
Yeah, I preferred that.
Something that I think we were just aging out of the Thundercats.
No, Dungeons and Dragons was better than Thundercats.
I mean, it was.
It's a more compelling story. Who
Yes.
gives a monkeys about cats lost in space?
But anyway, so in both of those cases, I was very conscious that the opening sequence looked like things like Battle of the Planets.
Yeah.
But all of the rest of the animation just wasn't quite up to scratch. And as I got older, I maybe understood. I think I actually thought that the opening sequence was done by maybe Japanese animators, and the rest of it was just done by some rubbish heads.
And now it's all done in South Korea. So who's had the last laugh there?
Mattel, I think.
Almost certainly.
But yes, so they talk a lot about stuff like that. They talk about a bunch of children's TV I didn't really understand, but also a lot about Sesame Street, and you would not believe how much Timothy Swan and Max Barnard know about both Thomas the Tank Engine and the Jerry Anderson, the Super Mario Nation world of... I didn't even know there was continuity in those programs.
Or cared.
But that's more our age group.
Yeah.
That's more our era, definitely.
I love them, though. And then there was the mid-80s Thunderbirds revival as well. We kind of had it twice, didn't we? I remember Joe Knighty on a Sunday.
That was a creepy show.
It was, yeah, very creepy.
I loved it, though. It's my favourite of all of them.
I think he was, I imagine if he was around now, there'd probably be, like, court cases and stuff.
Joss Whedon remade it as Dollhouse.
No?
Yeah, it's basically the same story.
I haven't seen Doll's House. Would that be funny if I'd seen Doll's House?
Probably. It's basically the same story. The only difference is it's a hot lady who gets hired by the company, hires them out, and they get brain implants, but they don't have any personality until they get it put in them. And I think it starts to malfunction in her, and she starts to remember stuff. But of course, because it's a hot lady, I think in the first job she does, someone hires her as like a perfect weekend romance date person, which is a little bit sketchy. So it's basically a complicated prostitute.
She I get hot as well, and I'm not sure if it's my medication, but I get very hot very quickly. I sweat. It's embarrassing. Maybe that's the same thing for her. Maybe it's some sort of because I'm going to ask my doctor. I see her next week, and I'm going to ask her about that.
She did sweat quite a lot in the program.
She's hot.
Yeah. But anyway, so I'll put a link to their first episode in the show notes. It is very long, but it's very worth listening to, and not just because they talk about me. And at one point, Tim refers to parenting podcasts. He said, all of the parenting podcasts I listen to, and then he said, well, the one I listen to. I'm assuming he's talking about this.
Probably not.
Anyway, so...
talking about parenting, I learnt an invaluable lesson at the weekend. Our daughter has got to the age now where she calls me out on hypocrisy.
She's 13?
Yeah, not directly.
Oh.
She didn't say you're a hypocrite, I hate you.
All right.
She called me out on what she perceived to be an inconsistency. A little while ago, a friend had come round and they played and they made an awful mess. And Scarlett was kicking off about having to clean. And I said, well, part of being a good host is, you clean up after your guests have gone. You don't expect necessarily your guests to clear up with you. Obviously, I think a good guest will at least make an effort, but,
Did you say that to her?
Didn't say that to her, no, because I don't want her throwing that back in my face next time that guest comes round. Because, all the time I'm thinking about what potential embarrassment could what I'm telling my child cause me in the future. And that's how I parent.
No, it's fair.
Through anxiety.
It's the best way, as far as I can gather.
So, we were around our friend's house on Saturday night, which was, given my current state of mind, Nicola almost had to drag me out of the house with my fingernails scratching grooves into the floorboards. But it ended up being a very pleasant evening indeed. The two friends went to see are actually really good pick-me-up company. But they've got a child who's a year and a half. About the same, they're born within a few weeks of Noah.
I think I've met them.
Yeah, you have, yeah. And she was playing with some of their child's toys, and it was getting a bit much. So I said to her, if we take anything else out, can you tidy a few of the bits away? She turned around to me and she said, but you said, when you're a guest, you don't have to tidy things away.
Yeah, you see, that's difficult, because actually the rules, not the rules, what you did was you led with rules that are actually kind of complicated and don't always match up with each other. Whereas what you were trying to do deep down, probably, you were trying to instill a certain value in her, which is, it's just nice to tidy up and not to be a burden on the people around you.
Yeah.
And not to be too much of an arse about it.
Yeah.
Which seems like a much simpler value than the whole set of rules. But of course, the child just wouldn't understand that, so you have to go with the rules. And
it's after that I had to rock the old, a good guest.
Yeah, oh no. Yeah. But she's going to remember that, though.
Yeah, I know.
So you've tangled yourself up.
Well, no, the thing is, right...
Stitch yourself up like a kipper.
The way I look at it, though, is she's only ever going to be tidying up after her friend leaves.
Right.
So I'm hoping that, we see them, maybe once a month, once every couple of months. So I'm hoping that, she'll forget.
It's really unlikely that she's going to tell that guest while they're there, look, you need to tidy up because a good guest tidies up, and you didn't last time.
She's got her...
You prick.
She's got her first dinner date this Friday.
Has she?
Yeah.
A date?
Yeah.
Are you sure about this?
Yeah.
Seems a bit early.
She's off to see her closest male friend, Daniel.
Oh.
Around his house, and they're having dinner together.
Was he the one I'd heard about?
No. And also William she's fond of. There's a number of young men in her life.
Blimey.
Yeah, she does all right.
Exciting. Yeah. So how are you, James?
I
mean, I'm not asking because I think the podcast listener it's just wants to know. It's just that Amy asked me, and I realised I hadn't talked to you properly in about a week.
I've been better. I've been very low recently.
Yeah.
Still off work.
Yeah. I'm feeling about 2015 so far, although Amy and I have some very big, exciting things on the horizon because there's the house and there's a baby coming very soon. But there's that proverb, I think it's Korean, might be
probably
Japanese.
South Korean, they made it up while they were doing all that animation.
Might be Japanese, I don't know. It's Chinese. I think there's a Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times.
I know, and I use it. I like that one very much. I
like it very much. At the moment, I could do with things being a bit more boring. We've had family issues, not family issues, family health issues, which are quite stressful, but obviously for because it's not our issue specifically, I can't go into. Which are preying quite heavily on us, and the house stuff is all. There's lots of odd stuff, so I'm having to deal with labourers, which isn't a thing I've had to do before because our fence came down. We've been in our house for about 5 years, and during that time, fences on either side of ours have come down, but ours never have. And now when we're 3 or 4 weeks away from moving out and selling up...
Wow, that close?
Yeah, crikey. Really soon. The fences have come down. So there's that. And we've both been Amy and I have both been very ill, which is leaving me quite... when I turned up here, obviously I was very sullen.
Full of fucking woe, I tell you. It's the last thing you want. If you're suffering depression, the last thing you want is you turning up on your doorstep.
See, it's not. I'm not sad. I'm just really low energy. And part of the reason I'm really low energy is because I've basically shat out all my nutrients. Every single nutrient is gone.
It's taking your precious fluids.
And more besides.
Yeah, you resembled very much. Do you remember the Raggy Dolls? Because you resembled Sad Sack from the Raggy Dolls very much. And I thought, well, no, there's only room for one Sad Sack in this flat, mate.
No,
don't you come moping over my territory.
The universe is plenty miserable enough for the two of us. But for me at the moment, it's very obviously. I talked a little bit last week, and we'll probably talk a bit about in the future about the idea of the new normal and feeling very drained and stretched. But at the moment, for me, it's very much a health thing. In that I feel like I've had a cold forever. Certainly, I've had a cold. I haven't been healthy since Thought Bubble, which was in November.
That's a long time ago.
And so I'm very much, well, maybe I should stop worrying about when my nose is going to stop feeling blocked. Maybe it's just always going to feel blocked. And at the same time, Amy and I had this is the thing. It's normally your job, James, on the podcast, to go on about how great your wife is, right? And I'm normally a little bit more sardonic.
You want to talk about how great my wife is.
But
she's only sat over there, so that's a bonus. That would be really good for her ego.
But basically at the moment, Amy's very heavily pregnant. We're due in March, so she's very big. And she's having a few more issues this time because she's also running around after a toddler. So she's got her back's been giving her a bit of grief today, and she had quite a bad stomach on Friday and stuff like that. And I've had a really bad cold symptoms, which took me out of action for a couple of days. Noah's not been very well. She wasn't very well for a little bit during that. Both she and I had a really bad... she got it a lot worse than me, sickness bug. And pretty much all of the house stuff, in terms of buying the new house and selling the house, she's chasing up all of doing pretty much everything on that side. Because she's at home more than I am, so she's making more of the phone calls and stuff like that. And it's quite amazing that she's managing it. It was her 31st birthday yesterday, on Monday. And we went away for the weekend. It wasn't because last year it was my treat to her, we went away, but this year we had to do things on a smaller scale, so it was like out of our joint funds. But she arranged most of it, and so we left Noah with her parents, and we went to a nice hotel near where they are. We like a swimming pool, so it was quite nice. It was an odd hotel. I think it was supposed to be a posh hotel, but it was just off a roundabout. Lucky
she's already pregnant, eh? Because number 3 will be on the way.
Yeah, I know. I think you can stack them, can't you?
I don't know. Probably.
In a backup womb.
Yeah.
I think the intention is that it's quite a posh hotel, or it was a decent star hotel, but it was also just off a roundabout. So it was one of those. I think it's meant as a really nice conference hotel. So the hotel itself was okay. We had a nice big room. That was nice. The swimming pool was nice. The restaurant, if a bit small. And we had a nice 3-course meal because it was part of a special deal. So it was all done relatively cheaply.
I mean, how big do you need the restaurant to be if you've got a table?
Yeah, no, I mean, the restaurant was... Did I say the restaurant was really big? I thought I said it was nice.
No, you said it's really small.
The swimming pool was really small.
Oh, right, yeah. Because small swimming pool's an inconvenience. A small restaurant's fine.
Yes, you sounded almost like when Oscar Wilde said it. I believe Oscar Wilde once said, "A small swimming pool is is a bit of a pain.
It's an inconvenience.
It's an inconvenience.
But a small restaurant, a delight for the soul. And then he went to prison.
Yeah. Couldn't have just married some 20-year-old in his time, could he?
No. Maybe he would have. It had solved a lot of his problems. Yeah. I mean, the going to prison problems. His homosexuality wasn't a problem. That's good.
Yeah, all right. Social justice warrior.
Isn't that funny? Because I only just found out today what SJW means.
What did you think it stood for?
I didn't care. It's the thing. But John Hodgman was going off on one about something or other and kept talking about SJWs. I thought, well, it's about time I looked it up. And I looked
now
it
that
up.
John Hodgman's involved.
Well,
when all those women were talking about it and getting upset and stuff, you didn't care. But now that one of your lot...
Oh, no.
Go on.
But, yeah, well, it's a, middle-class white man started saying it. And I'm like, oh, it's something I ought to pay attention to, clearly. Because it's usual for him to rant. He doesn't normally do it. But it's about 15, 20 tweet.
Yeah, he numbered each one, which I thought was quite sweet.
Rage he went off on. But, yeah, it's not a nice thing to call someone, is it, really?
I don't think he did it on purpose. Well, it's probably a badge of pride if that's what you... I mean, it doesn't... Social justice warrior, if you believe in social justice, it isn't a bad thing to be called, is it?
No, but the definition of it, though, is you don't really know what you're talking about. You're just jumping in ignorantly for the sake of jumping in.
I, at this point, just assume nobody knows what they're talking about on any side of anything.
To be fair, I mean, every time I open my mouth, it's safe to assume. I don't want... Do you know, I've decided today that that a faster than light travel is almost certainly impossible. They found out these 5 planets that sit in the Goldilocks zone, but right at the beginning of... They would have been some of the first solar systems to have been created, and they suggest that all 5 of these planets potentially could sit inside the golden zone for life.
Especially our sort of life.
Yeah, so presumably, it's that much older than our own solar system that had time to develop technology and so forth. They ain't come visited us. So clearly there are no aliens.
They might have come and visited us already.
No, I've already used logic, so...
We might not have been aware of it.
I've done logic, so it doesn't... No.
Bearing in mind, most people don't know what was happening 5 years ago.
There was an election and my daughter was born.
Okay, most people don't know what was happening. Anyway, so John Hodgman's, because of the nature of Twitter, I read that almost completely backwards, even though it was numbered for convenience.
It was more fun that way, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I think...
I have to say, the person he named, it was all quite amicable between them. They were all being quite polite to each other.
Well, it was very difficult to see. I think John Hodgman was coming down on the side of maybe people need to communicate with each other a bit better.
Do you know, I'm glad you said that, because I didn't know what he was going on about. So it's ironic that was his point.
Well, and the part of the problem with it was he said a bunch of things that, and I don't think he did it on purpose. I don't think he was being a craftsman with words.
Yeah.
He said a bunch of things that it would be very easy for either side of this particular debate, left or right, to take out of context and get really angry with him. So I feel a bit bad for John Hodgman, because I think he was trying to be reasonable about the whole thing, but I get the feeling he will have said stuff that's wound everyone up.
Twitter really isn't the place for that sort of long diatribe.
There was a really...
Write a blog. It goes over 3, write a blog.
There was a really interesting, a really good talk by Lee Alexander that was doing the rounds, who's a games critic, who's ended up getting involved with a lot of the Gamergate stuff, just by dint of being female and writing about games. She was already kind of the target for a lot of this culture war stuff. But the talk she did, really only very tangentially refers to women in games and female characters in games. It talks a little bit about how scary the culture has kind of, or how uncomfortable the culture's kind of become. But the lion's share of the talk is about culture, the corporate culture, basically, having a medium that is allowing corporate culture to completely decide everything in a medium. I'm not making the point particularly well. She talked a lot about 90s music and basically bands like a lot of bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, who actively that she was into, because that was her time as a teenager. I think her formative time. The bands then and the kind of movement then was very anti-corporate culture. And so there are like stories of how Axl Rose really liked Guns N' Roses really liked Nirvana, and Axl Rose wanted them to play at his birthday and wanted them to tour. But Nirvana were like, screw that, you're corporate shills at this point.
Well, it's a bit like the slacker culture which I got very much caught up in. Yeah,
and the core of her argument, the core of what she was saying, I mean, it wasn't really an argument, it was just a really, really good talk, was very, very similar to... It is kind of very similar to what I end up saying about comics quite a lot when we've talked about them, more on Momcast, because there haven't been any really major issues that we've got involved in on We Have issues so far.
Which is ironic given
the name. Yeah. But that whenever a company does something weird or wrong or makes a big decision, everyone piles in on one side or another, and it's like Marvel, the point that she makes over and over again about video game companies or Microsoft or whatever, and that I have made about Marvel and DC and also Image, is these companies do not need people to defend them. The idea that we as consumers have to pile in and defend the right to not be criticised for corporations, like for corporations that are producing media, is kind of crazy, because like a mature medium can do all sorts of interesting things. There's room for counterculture within a large enough medium.
Do you know, it's funny you talk about the nature of social media and how I guess you weren't directly alluding to how issues sort of blow up suddenly and people then sort of take sides. I was listening to a show this morning on Radio 4, and it was talking about, it's looking ahead to the next election and how public opinion will shape it, and how methods of the public expressing their opinions has changed. And I hate to say it, but Tony Blair, he made some good points.
Wow.
He was talking about politicians.
Was he chewing on a baby's head at the time?
He wasn't, no. And I think this is what he. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to go into a wider point about him. He was an arsehole, and that's all there is to it. He was making some good points about, at the moment we've got a political class that seem to react with the herd, if you like, you know. So. They go into sort of damage control very quickly, and it's because politicians haven't learned how to react correctly to social media, and no one really has. It's a really new way of communicating. I don't think any of us, it's not mature yet. None of us really know how to pass it properly and to either not be swept away by the latest outrage, or to, you know, it's a burgeoning communicative thing.
Medium.
That's it. I didn't want to say
technology.
Medium, no. I didn't want to say medium.
Technology.
No.
It's technology.
Medium technology. It's not
medium,
a big one.
Not a large technology. No. Not a small. No, by no means a small technology. Even though there's only a certain limited number of characters.
Gamergate, I think, is it a really good example of how sort of something quite ugly and pernicious sort of blew up, isn't it? In a really sort of strange way, because of people taking meaning from parts of it here and there, and
the problem,
twisting it, and
the problem with
does that make me sound like I'm pro Gamergate? 'Cause I'm really not.
No. It makes you sound like earlier today you didn't know what SJW stood for.
No, I don't. I didn't care.
but the problem with describing Gamergate that way is that there seems to be quite a lot of evidence to suggest that an awful lot of it is engineered. An awful lot of the outrage is actually it is people who very much understand that that to get certain
there's
responses you can manipulate things.
There's a definite agenda amongst a certain organised, but they understand how it works.
Yeah.
They're preying on the fact that an awful lot of people don't.
And with politicians, though, they're
Which is why politicians need to be careful. Because there are people that can sort of nudge, they haven't yet got to the point where they're able to be opinion formers on social media. They're opinion reactors.
Kind of, but luckily nobody cares for all of Anonymous's posturing. Nobody cares as much about politics as they do about video games or comics or keeping women out of conversations and stuff like that.
Which is why we've made Nicholas sit in the other room.
So in summary, Tony Blair.
Tony Blair is right, basically.
Tony Blair, a powerful white man, made some very good points. So anyway, Lee Alexander did this talk, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But at the end of it, there was a question and answer session. But Lee Alexander's talk was about how we don't have to always choose the dominant mainstream culture, effectively.
Yeah.
How once a medium becomes big enough, if you don't have a counterculture, then you're doing something wrong. If you don't allow a counterculture, and if every time someone in a counterculture tries to talk, it's supposed to be applauded, not stamped down. A big part of Gamergate, and it gets confused. I don't think for unreasonable reasons, but it because the counterculture in video games happens to be because it's a culture that's largely aimed at teenage boys and young white men. So the counterculture, by definition, ends up being female voices, talking about female representation and stuff like that. And so the reaction against that counterculture also is a reaction against women in that area, and those two things, it's very difficult. Anyone who says it's easy to extricate, to get those two things, to separate them out, is kind of fooling themselves, I think. At the very least, it's complicated. It's not as straightforward as saying, it's obviously not misogynistic or any of that stuff. But but she didn't really talk about Gamergate. She just talked about how it's good that there's a counterculture in video games now, and how it should be applauded. And at the end, there were 3 questions. 2 of them were very... I wouldn't say that the guys asking the questions were Gamergaters, but the questions were transparently using rhetoric that's from Gamergate. Understandably, in one case, it was a guy who English was his second language, and he was obviously a bit nervous as well, because he was like, she's a very confident speaker. He was in the audience and just asking a question, raising his hand, asking a question. So his question was a bit twitchy. So it's possible that it wasn't just that there is no argument to be made pro it. He was saying, also, what are you saying that we should replace the culture, and what do you feel about ethics in gaming and stuff like that? They were all buzzwords. And she had a perfect answer for everything. He asked the question civilly. She responded charmingly and civilly. The third question was similar, and again, she handled it, I think, perfectly well. The people talked to her civilly. She responded civilly and intelligently, which I kind of think is the point that John Hodgman was getting at, albeit in a very squeaky sort of, I'm being very careful about what I'm saying sort of a way. She's very confident. I think she might have had these conversations before.
Sure.
The way lots of people have been sharing this on the internet is, she's talking for about half an hour or 40 minutes before these 2 minutes at the end. They're sharing it as, you should hear how Lee Alexander slammed this Gamergater at the end of her thing, and they focus on the guy whose English wasn't great,
right?
And it's kind of like, well, no, she didn't really slam him. there wasn't any conflict.
Yeah.
There wasn't any friction there at all. There could have been, but like she handled it diplomatically, and so I kind of feel like, while my sympathies definitely lie with the sort of anti-Gamergate, especially in this area, my sympathies definitely lie with the anti-Gamergate camp. That sort of taking the rhetorical stance, saying you could, nearly every time you go to a piece of video that says, see how this person slams this person. It happened with the Rich IO8 interview with the interview of Krishnan and Guru Murphy and Rich IO8, and everyone was sharing it as like, look at this guy, this really cool guy handle this idiot, and then you watch it and it's like, well, Krishnan and Guru Murphy's clearly having a fucking whale of a time. You know what I mean? He's obviously enjoying that this isn't just the same interview he gives like 2 or 3 times a day sort of thing. Nearly every time you watch a video like that, it's shared in that BuzzFeedy way, and it's just, that's not the way the world is. Smart people communicate in smart ways, and it doesn't need to be dressed up in that way.
You say that ultimately what we've learnt from social media then is all how to talk in link-baiting BuzzFeed language. You
won't believe what I've learnt about from social media.
The top 7 things I don't give a monkey's about.
The interesting times.
7's a funny number, isn't it, for a list? Why is 7?
I think it's just
arbitrary.
Yeah, lists are rubbish, aren't they?
No, I know they're very handy if you've got nothing else to write about.
Interesting times, other things, other reasons why I was a little bit drained and confused by the time I got here. So anyway, hotel, we ate our food, it was very rich, spent a lot of time pooed an awful lot. Not particularly nice poo, not your satisfying poos, your nasty. To the extent that, like, I actually noticed when I had a satisfying poo again. It was very strange. Lots of really great times with Noah and with our nephews. That was really good. Our dog, though, Anya, the older of the 2 dogs, isn't very well at the moment, and we aren't sure what's wrong with her. So she went to the vets today. So basically, I went to work today, got home from work, had to clean poo out of dog poo this time, not Amy or my poo, out of the back seat of the car in the dark, which was interesting, and then eat dinner and then quickly come over here. So I'm just feeling a little bit at 6s and 7s. Also, when I drove over here, I had to have the windows open.
Obviously.
And I can't tell, there's that, you're thinking...
You'll be wanting to get that car valeted, I imagine, in the not-too-distant future.
You're thinking, well, it smells okay, I can smell fabric cleaner, so obviously it doesn't smell of poo. And then you're thinking... But under that fabric, is there a slight tinge of can I just, in the back of my throat, can I just feel a little bit of dog poo in the back of my throat? It's a little bit unnerving.
And the answer's almost certainly yes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's an old bird as well, Anya, so I do worry about her.
Dog or bird, come on.
She's a dog bird.
She's a dog bird.
She's graceful like a swan. This was supposed to be, this episode was supposed to be the length of a mug of coffee.
Don't give me all this. You always, never. You going on about your bloody Gamergate obsession again.
You going on about your best friend, Tony Blair.
Very interesting documentary. I forget the name of it, but it's well worth a listen.
Is it?
Yeah. It's not all Tony Blair. I just thought he made an interesting point in terms of how those in power react to... public outcry.
Also, when I was getting in the car to come over, as I was opening the window,
you've got a boo-boo
I totally smacked my hand on it. So all the way over here, I thought
it's right in your knuckle. That was painful,
and it was dark, so I couldn't tell if it was bleeding or not. I was just like, oh no, it's fine. I'm probably okay driving. It's fine, not a worry.
Driving, tear-filled eyes,
just. Crying, listening to Childish Gambino album, which is good.
Not Enya.
No, he's a young black rap actor, like Will Smith.
Like Reggie Watts.
Or Reggie Watts.
I like Reggie Watts.
I like Reggie Watts.
If you're fucking, you're probably fucking.
If you're not fucking, then you're probably not fucking. It's a really chunky song, that one.
Oh, it's got fat beats.
Seems much less problematic than the album I'm going to be listening to in the car on the way home in a minute.
I don't like listening to music that challenges me. I like Dixieland jazz, and that's about it. As long as it's not played by white dudes.
Right. So, as Benedict Cumberbatch would have it...
Coloureds.
Coloureds.
Can't believe he did that. That's brilliant.
His apology seems very sincere, and
I'm sure it is.
It actually is quite lovely, but it is a bit of a gaffe, and it's very embarrassing for him and very uncomfortable for a lot of his fans, I imagine.
Do you think that's why the MP was talking about wanting less people from privileged backgrounds in the to be successful? Because that's what public school ingrains you with, is this sort of air of superiority over the fuzzy wuzzies and stuff. Because public school is a system that was created to train young men to govern in an empire, and it hasn't changed much since. So you have to have this air of superiority over the riffraff. So he can't help it. It's just his background. We should probably let him off. He's had a hard enough time with all of that money.
I think that particular term, the use of the term coloured, is one of those ones that is quite confusing for people who might otherwise be quite well-meaning. And I say that
particularly offensive when it's pluralised as well, I find.
Yeah, but I say that speaking from the point of view of having seen someone who was really twisting themselves up in knots, trying to be progressive. This chap I used to work with was very well spoken, but clearly over time I realised that this was clearly because he didn't want to sound like the rest of his family. And during one of the conversations in which he was talking about how ignorant the rest of his family was, he said that, God, some of my family, we got onto the subject of race, and he'd said, God, some of my family still even call coloured people black. And I had to say to him, I kind of laughed because I thought he was joking, and then I realised he wasn't. And I said, yeah, I think black people prefer black to coloured. And he was like, really? And I think part of it is that it sounds benign, because part of the problem when we talk about race is that you feel that addressing it directly, it's coloured as euphemistic, whereas we feel like if we're trying to be polite, we feel like addressing it directly is somehow the problem, that noticing that someone is black is the problem. But the other thing I think is that people who are old enough to remember that coloured used to be a term that people used all the time, and who are on the periphery of all of these conversations, probably find the term people of colour a little bit... It's confusing if you're not engaging with it directly. Do you know what I mean? Because it felt...
Well, they talked about people of colour on the Cosby Show in the 80s, and that's sort of pretty much where I got my steer from.
Yeah, but I think it's become a really common, a much more common term recently. But it's...
that's what a POC is.
A what?
A POC.
I don't know what that is.
Person of colour.
Yes,
POC.
POC. I have trouble with it because I think it sounds weird, and it is kind of reductive because it says that it divides everyone into the group white people and everyone else. And I understand what it was designed.
To be fair, white people have been doing that since time immemorial.
But that's kind of the problem with it. But I think it was designed to include people other than black people in conversations about how awful people were treated. And so it's already a complicated term, and then I think people just.
But if you're gonna have a term to describe people who've been mistreated because of their race, you have to create a term that excludes white people because they're the ones that have been doing it.
Well, but if that's the only reason you're using that term, that makes sense. But if you're just using it as descriptive, it's it kind of doesn't take account of the differences in culture between black people and.
If you're not using it for that purposes, you should probably use the term person.
is it time to go now?
It was time to go about half an hour ago. I thought you'd take the hint of the history. When I start getting really argumentative, that's when it's always...
But you're always argumentative.
No, I'm not.
Oh. Listener, you can listen to all of our previous episodes at twogrownmen.net. You can contact us on Twitter. I'm Nick Sight. James is...
James MOMB.
You're not going to make something up?
That's the other show.
Oh, that's the other show.
Yeah.
Because we do another show, don't we?
Yeah.
You can talk to us on Twitter at either of those handles. You can also email us at 2gmpodcast@gmail.com. And obviously you can subscribe to this and listen to it at any podcatcher that you desire.
I think what you should do to get the optimum listening experience, burn it onto a disc, go into an HMV, insist that they play it over the speakers. It's the optimum listening experience.
I think what you should really do is you should listen. You should, and I'll put it in the show notes. You should go and listen to Tim and Max's first episode.
Two young men,
but age it in your head by about 20 years.
Yeah,
a piece.
Yeah,
20 years a piece, and
their combined age is barely one of us.
And listen to it in 50-minute chunks. 55-minute chunks.
Listen to this episode in 55-minute chunks. You said you'd like us to do some extra podcasts just in case we can't make it. I think we've got 3 or 4 shows in there, haven't we?
I didn't mean tonight.
That's what she said. Finished watching The Office. The American one.
Yeah?
I like it.
Can you talk me through how you felt about each season in turn?
No, I enjoyed it.
And give me a little profile on each of your favourite characters.
I cried a lot, and I prefer it to the English Office because it's got some genuine heart and characters I actually care about.
And it lasts longer. It's
not just that.
There's more of them.
I actually care about the characters in the American Office, where I didn't even really give a monkeys about Tim and Jasper Carrot's daughter.
Is she Jasper Carrot's daughter?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've forgotten her name. I feel awful identifying her by her white middle-class father's name. But
it's all right.
Why?
It's all right. You were more interested in what Tony Blair had to say than Lee Alexander as well.
Yeah, that's true. No, what I was doing there was I'd listened to something relevant. I was relating what I'd heard to what you were telling me about. That's what I was doing. It just so happened to had been, man. I'd rather listen to Lee Alexander talk than Tony Blair because she has started far fewer unjustified wars.
That's the trick, though, isn't it? That's the trap. That's the trap we men keep falling into, is that, like, it isn't our fault that
women want us to start wars.
No, it isn't our fault that we just end up hearing more interesting things said by white men in power. That's just the world we live in.
I can't help but feel that you're painting a picture of me that I'm not entirely comfortable with.
I'm painting a picture of all of us.
Not all men. Not all men.
Just all of the ones in this room.
Yeah, just all of the ones sat where I'm sat.
Bye-bye.